Heather Grimstead.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to be here. So I'm going to share a few thoughts about the moments that matter throughout a customer's journey and building one-to-one personalized communications that speak to those moments. So to give a bit of background, WeddingWire started in 2007, and it's a global company that features an online directory with over 400,000 vendors and 4 million reviews across 15 countries. Our priority is driving engaged couples to request information from the vendors that advertise with us. So when we're talking about personalized messages, we all know it matters, right? We don't need to have that conversation. But let's talk a little bit about how much it matters and why it matters. So standing out in the inbox against mass communications. The thing to keep in mind with this is that as companies are implementing more and more advanced personalization, it's not standing out anymore. It's becoming a lot more routine. It's harder to stand out. So one-to-one personalization has really shifted from being a competitive advantage to being a competitive must-have. So we need it to keep up. Secondly, to state the obvious, it works better, right? So to give a specific example, we have a confirmation message that we send to a segment of users after they request information from a vendor. This message worked well for us. It's a confirmation. It's the right time. But we added a list of personalized vendors to the message, and the click-through rate went up 70%. That's nice click-through rate. But what I really like to talk about, what I like to share around the office, is that the conversion rate went up over 75%. So as email marketers, if we can make this kind of change throughout our email program, then that really moves from being incremental change to being real, tangible business impact. Third, it enhances the customer experience. So a better customer experience means better customer loyalty. And our customers expect it. So 52% of consumers are likely to switch brands if they're not sent communications that are personalized to them. And that number goes up to 65% on the B2B side. They're also willing to share information if we're going to give them those personalized messages. So 63% of millennials are willing to share personal data in exchange for personalized offers and discounts. 58% are willing to share personal data in exchange for personalized recommendations. Now, I do question how much longer they're going to be able and willing to share that personal data. With the recent news revelations about data transparency and a certain social media platform, we're going to have to work really hard, all of us, as marketers, to deliver enough value that people continue to be willing to share that data. So I like to think of behavioral messages in two buckets, so user actions and external actions. So user actions are what most of us think of as behavioral targeting. It includes website actions like page views, product views, email engagement, app activity, conversions. It also includes interactions with our sales team and our support teams. In-store activity, it's not an option for WeddingWire, but certainly for the retailers in the room. Don't forget about offline activity. So this first example is a message that we send to users who have viewed vendor storefronts on the site, but haven't requested information from a vendor. So it's kind of like an abandoned cart. And this could be applied to any action on your website, like, for example, abandoning a lead form. So anything that might indicate an incomplete action. So what I particularly like about this message, it's personalized with the storefronts that the person viewed, but we've combined the user data and the vendor data to indicate whether or not the vendor is available on the user's wedding date. So the personalization is really making it more valuable for the user. Another thing to think about when you're using behavioral triggers is what conversation can you start? So after somebody requests information from a venue, we send a confirmation, but it's a few days later that we send this message. So it's an editorial message offering them some advice about how to work with venues and how to figure out who to pick. It's purely about brand engagement. We're not trying to get them to take any particular conversion. But when we look at the open to click rate, it's 45%. So we know that we're really sending the right content at the right time. This is an example from the B2B side. It's our thank you for renewing message. goes out about a week after a vendor renews their annual agreement with us. And I wanted to share this example because we're using in-action to customize the content. So we know that vendors who have up-to-date listings are more appealing to couples. So we add tips. We've got an entire collection of possible tips, and we've got scripting in place that shows the list based on what the vendor hasn't done. So for this particular vendor, they haven't updated their main image in the past 6 months, so we're making that the top tip. I know one of the struggles with personalization is getting the data into the right place. So I think sometimes a misused, underused opportunity is email engagement. So what users are clicking on, what device are they using, when are they clicking? So our data science team looks at past click behavior for all of our users, and they use that data to recommend the first article in our weekly newsletter and to recommend the subject line. So this is an example we sent on our 10-year anniversary to our vendors, and we customized it with behavior from the vendor over the entire relationship with WeddingWire. So this personalized timeline type of message has become really popular over the past couple of years, and it's popular because people like to hear about themselves. And what we saw with this message is people kept returning to it. So the total open rate just continued to go up over time as people revisited the message. So external actions. So we just talked about user actions, but on the flip side of that, we have things that are happening to the user. So actions that other users are taking or product changes that might impact the recipient. So that might include a new review on a product that a customer is looking at, forum activity, related products, if there's low inventory on a product. So first example on this side, your reviews are crushing it. So major business for us, one of our competitive advantages is having a lot of reviews on our vendors, so we want to encourage that. So when a review reaches a particular threshold for number of views, we trigger a message to the person who wrote it and let them know people are looking at it. So we know from surveys that the primary motivator for people to write a review is to help other couples. This validates that motivation, and it's a great time to ask them to write another review. Also on the review side, when the vendor gets a new review, we actually trigger a notification to anybody who's recently expressed interest in that vendor. So reviews are one of the main ways that couples are making their decision, so there's a high level of interest in that change. So on the B2B side, this is actually a fairly new message for us. We send a notice to our free vendors. So we have a freemium model, and one of our major priorities is shifting those free listings to premium. So when our free vendors get leads from us, we trigger a notification, we give them a little advice about how to manage those leads, and remind them that the premium vendors get 7 times more leads. So when they're getting value from us, is a perfect time to reach out and nudge them to give up a little money. So this example, it's back to reviews again. This is another message to our vendors. So when a wedding date passes for a user, we trigger a message to any vendor that we know is associated with that wedding. We know that couples are most likely to write a review when the vendor personally asks. So we're using this as an opportunity to let that vendor know now is the right time to go make that ask. So identifying opportunities. One of the things with behavioral messages, one of the challenges is finding enough scale. So sometimes we may find a moment in time that could be really great engagement if we put a message against it, and it just doesn't have enough scale. So we have to identify enough opportunities with enough scales to have an impact. One way to do that is to really study your customer journey, starting with your persona. So I'm sure most of us have gone through this exercise. Annette and Ashton is a WeddingWire couple. This is based on our newlywed survey, And if you have internal or external research, it can be a really great source of inspiration. So map out your customer journey. I'm sure we've all done this exercise, right? But what I really want to ask here is, did you do that exercise and file it away somewhere, or are you really referencing it on a regular basis? Are you using that as a source of inspiration to make sure that you're really meeting their needs? And once you've laid out this journey, then overlay it with the specific interactions that that customer is having with your brand. Because every single one of these interactions becomes an opportunity to start a conversation. So if we look at users who have saved 5 photographers, so you can favorite vendors on the WeddingWire site. Based on this single action, we can initiate a lot of messages. So we could provide value by sharing related editorial content. We could help them make a decision by sharing reviews. So if you go through this exercise for all of those actions, you should end up with a healthy list of potential behavioral messages that you can start with. So I'm going to take just a brief moment in closing to talk about what it takes to implement this kind of message. So data, right? But we have to have it integrated across all the systems, and we need good data, good quality data in real time or near real time, because nothing kills a conversation with a customer like a message personalized based on bad data. But when Monetate asked marketers what their major obstacles were for moving from segmentation to one-to-one personalization, data quality was ranked as the #1 obstacle. And sustainable data architecture was ranked as #3. And secondly, tech. So let's be honest about it and lay it on the table. It's harder to execute these messages. And we can do things that make them easier, make them take less time in the long run. But you have to have some know-how to really get that set up. So email teams either need to have those skills, or they need to have access to those skills through other teams or through partners to get all the scripting and data management set up. So according to Salesforce, only 23% of marketers are extremely satisfied with their ability to leverage customer data to create a more relevant experience. So over the past couple of days, I've gotten to talk to a lot of you, and I think this room represents that 23%. But if you don't count yourself in that group, if you don't feel extremely satisfied, what steps are you taking to make that change? So thanks for giving me a few minutes. And there is a roundtable later today about personalization, and I would love to see you there and talk a bit more about it.
Thank you, Heather. We have time for questions right now. If any of you have any questions right now you'd like to pose to Heather? I'm curious about how, with all of these behavioral triggers that are possible, and that and all of these different moments, overall user experience in terms of frequency capping, understanding holistically what the user experience is how many emails to send, what's the limit, and what's the overall experience, and are you measuring that in any way?
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge. And we have rules in place to make sure that people aren't getting too many messages in a particular day. But actually in the AI discussion, something that came up yesterday is, what would you like AI to do? This is a place where I would really like AI to help us. Because when you have all of these messages they're coming from different angles, and we have other types of messages going, it is really difficult to manage the individual user experience. So we sometimes will look through, we'll pull specific users, we'll see what their experience looks like, but it is very difficult to manage.
Yep. Over here. Oh, yeah. Just your name here. Walter Rowland with Message Gears. I'm curious, are you guys using the same CRM for the B2B side of your business as the B2C? And similarly, the question would apply for your ESP. I'm just kind of curious, because you guys are unique in that you have to communicate with both sides.
Yeah, we do use the same ESP. We're using Salesforce Marketing Cloud for both sides. We actually have different business units set up for both so that we can maintain the data separately.
And Heather's going to be part of the roundtable on personalization this morning. Thank you very much, Heather.
Thanks.